The vampire king froze when he saw his ex at the bus stop, holding a baby she desperately tried to hide. Their eyes met for 1 second before she whispered, "Stay away," and vanished into the night. What he didn't know, the child's heartbeat sounded exactly like his own. The rain fell like needles against Draven's skin, but he didn't feel it. He hadn't felt rain, really felt it, in over 300 years. He stood beneath the awning of a closed bookstore, watching the empty street shimmer under neon lights. The gallery opening had been insufferable. Rich collectors pawing at artifacts they couldn't understand. That Ming vase. He'd commissioned it himself in 1420. The Egyptian scarab? He'd stolen it from a tomb before Napoleon was born. Playing human was exhausting. The number 47 bus was late. Typical. Even immortality couldn't fix public transportation. That's when he heard it. A heartbeat. Not just any heartbeat. This one pulled at something deep in his chest, like a hook dragging through water. Strong. Steady. Impossibly familiar in a way that made his centuries-old instinct scream. Draven's head snapped toward the sound. Across the street, beneath a flickering streetlight that cast shadows like dancing ghosts, stood a woman holding a baby. His heart, which barely beat anymore, stopped completely.
Arya.
7 years. 7 years since he'd walked away from her, since he'd erased himself from her life, like a ghost fading at dawn. 7 years since he'd loved someone enough to leave them. She looked
Different.
thinner. There were shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there before, and her hair was shorter, pulled back in a messy bun. She wore a faded blue jacket and jeans with holes in the knees, not the kind you bought that way, but the kind earned through actual wear. Life had touched her, marked her, made her even more beautiful in a way that hurt to see. But it was the bundle in her arms that froze Draven in place. A baby, wrapped in a blue blanket with little yellow ducks on it. The child's face was peaceful, sleeping despite the rain and the cold. Arya held him. Definitely a him. Draven could smell it, with a kind of desperate protectiveness that only mothers possessed. The baby's heartbeat thundered in Draven's ears, drowning out the rain, the traffic, everything. Thump-thump, thump-thump, thump-thump. Why did it sound like that? Like an echo of something he'd lost. Draven took a step forward before he could stop himself. His hand reached for the edge of the awning, gripping it so hard the metal bent beneath his fingers. Arya's head turned. Their eyes met across the wet street. For one crystallized moment, the world stopped. 7 years collapsed into nothing. He saw everything in her face, recognition, shock, and then something that cut deeper than any stake ever could.
Fear.
Not surprise. Not joy. Not even anger.
Fear.
Her arms tightened around the baby. Her whole body went rigid, like a deer that had just spotted a wolf. The streetlight above her head flickered once, twice, then died completely, plunging her into shadow. But Draven's eyes adjusted instantly. He saw her pale face, her trembling lips forming silent words he couldn't hear. The baby stirred against her chest, one tiny hand escaping the blanket to clutch at her jacket. The bus rumbled around the corner, its headlights cutting through the rain. Arya. Draven started forward, but she was already moving. She backed away from the curb, shaking her head. Her mouth opened, and across the distance, through the rain and the dying light, he heard her voice. It was hoarse, desperate, barely louder than a whisper, but it hit him like a shout. "Stay away." The bus hissed to a stop between them. Its doors opened with a pneumatic wheeze, and Arya practically ran up the steps. Through the windows, Draven caught glimpses of her, finding a seat at the back, wrapping the blanket tighter around the baby, her face turned toward the glass. Looking at him. The doors closed. The bus pulled away, spraying water across Draven's shoes. He stood frozen in the rain, watching the taillights disappear into the night. His mind was racing.
Arya.
Here. After 7 years of careful distance, of making sure she never knew where he went, of protecting her from his world by staying out of hers.
And a baby.
Draven's enhanced vision had caught details even in that brief moment. The child couldn't have been more than 6 months old. Maybe 7. The math crawled through his brain like spiders. 7 years since he left. 6 months old.
No, it couldn't be.
But that heartbeat. Draven pulled out his phone with shaking hands, a strange feeling for someone who hadn't trembled in centuries. His fingers flew across the screen, accessing databases that ordinary people didn't know existed. Facial recognition software that could identify anyone, anywhere.
Arya Moss.
Age 29. Last known address, Seattle. Current address, unknown. Employment, registered nurse. Last worked at Mercy General Hospital in Seattle. Relationship status, single. Children, none listed. Draven stared at the word none until his vision blurred. She'd hidden the child, not just from records, but from everything. No birth certificate in any database he could access. No hospital records. No paper trail at all. You didn't hide a child unless you were protecting it. And you didn't look at someone with that kind of fear, that bone-deep terror, unless you were protecting it from them. The rain fell harder now, plastering Draven's dark hair to his skull. Across the street, the dead streetlight suddenly flickered back to life, illuminating the empty spot where Arya had stood. On the ground, barely visible in the pooling water, was a small piece of paper. It must have fallen from her pocket. Draven moved before thinking, crossing the street in a blur too fast for human eyes to follow. He bent down, plucking the paper from the puddle before it could disintegrate completely. It was a pediatrician's appointment reminder. Patient name, Elias Moss. Date of birth, April 3rd. Draven did the math again. April. He'd left Arya in August, 7 years ago. 9 months before April would be.
July.
1 month before he left. The paper crumpled in his fist. Elias. His son. He had a son. And Arya had kept him secret for 6.5 years. The question was, why? The penthouse was silent except for the city's pulse 40 floors below. Draven stood at the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the rain streak down the glass like tears he could no longer shed. His reflection stared back, dark hair, sharp features, eyes that glowed faint amber in the darkness. A monster wearing a man's face. Behind him, the apartment stretched out in cold minimalism. White walls. Black furniture. No photographs, no warmth, nothing that suggested anyone actually lived here. The only color came from the relics scattered throughout, a Roman gladius mounted on the wall, an ornate Persian rug worth more than most houses, a jade Buddha from the Tang dynasty, sitting on the mantel.
Pieces of history. Pieces of him.
All of them dead. The crumpled appointment reminder sat on the glass coffee table, smoothed out as much as possible. Patient name, Elias Moss. The letters seemed to pulse with accusation. Why didn't she tell me? But even as the thought formed, Draven knew the answer. Because he'd left. Because he'd vanished from her life, without explanation, without goodbye, without giving her the chance to tell him anything at all. He'd thought he was protecting her. The memory surfaced like a corpse from deep water. 7 years ago.
August.
They'd been lying in her tiny apartment, tangled in sheets that smelled like lavender detergent. Arya's head on his chest, her breathing slow and even.
Happy.
He'd been tracing patterns on her shoulder, marveling at how warm she felt, how alive. Then his phone had buzzed. One message. 3 words in ancient Akkadian. The prophecy awakens. Draven had gone cold. The elders had found it, the Codex of Damnation, lost for over 2,000 years. And in it, written in blood that still flowed, was the prophecy that had haunted vampire kind since the first night. When mortal blood and immortal essence unite in love, a child shall be born of both worlds. This child will hold the power to end the eternal night or herald a new dawn. The The firstborn shall be the last, and in their choice lies the fate of two races. He'd read the translation 3 times, his hand tightening around the phone until the screen cracked. A child born from human and vampire. A hybrid. A weapon. Every vampire elder had the same thought. Destroy the possibility before it becomes reality. Arya had stirred against him. Draven? What's wrong? And he'd looked at her, beautiful, fragile, mortal Arya, and made his decision. By dawn, he was gone. Draven's fist slammed into the window. The reinforced glass spiderwebbed, but didn't break. He'd run. Like a coward, he'd run. Changed his identity, moved across the country, buried himself in the art world where he could hide among humanity's obsession with the past. He'd told himself it was for her safety, that the elders would kill her if they knew, that Lord Sarek, his former general, now his greatest enemy, would use her as bait to draw him out. But the real truth, the one that festered in his chest like silver poisoning. He'd been terrified. Terrified of the prophecy. Terrified of what a child might mean. Terrified of being responsible for ending his own kind or destroying hers. So he'd left her, never knowing she was already carrying that prophecy in her womb. Elias. The name felt foreign on his tongue. He'd had children before, centuries ago when he was still human. 2 daughters who'd lived, laughed, and died before he'd been turned. He barely remembered their faces now, just impressions of warmth and tiny hands. But this was different. This child was his in a way that defied nature itself. Half vampire, half human. Something that shouldn't exist. Something the vampire world would kill on sight. Draven pulled out his phone again, fingers flying across the screen. If Arya was in the city, she had to be somewhere close. Somewhere anonymous. Somewhere she could disappear. He accessed traffic cameras, facial recognition software, transit records. Illegal? Absolutely. But morality became flexible when you'd outlived most moral philosophers.
There.
A hit on the facial recognition. Arya Moss spotted on a bus heading north toward the Harbor District. Timestamp. 37 minutes ago. Draven zoomed in on the map. The Harbor District. Industrial. Cheap rent. Easy to get lost in. And right on the water. Plenty of escape routes if needed. Smart girl. His girl.
No.
Not his. Not anymore. The look on her face had made that clear. But Elias. Draven's jaw clenched. The child didn't ask to be born into this nightmare. Didn't ask to be a prophecy, a weapon, a target. And if the elders knew, if Sarek knew, they'd come for him. They'd rip through Arya to get to the child. They'd burn the whole city down if necessary. The penthouse suddenly felt like a cage. Draven grabbed his coat, black leather, nondescript, and headed for the door. His hand paused on the handle. What was he going to do? Show up on her doorstep? Force his way into their lives? She told him to stay away. That fear in her eyes hadn't been for herself. It had been for Elias. She was afraid of what he was. But staying away meant leaving them unprotected. And if the vampire world discovered the hybrid child. Draven opened the door. The prophecy was already awake. The question now was whether it would bring dawn or damnation. And he'd be damned twice over before he let anyone hurt his son. Greyhaven looked like a postcard for forgotten places. The coastal town clung to the edge of the world, where rocky cliffs met churning gray water and fog rolled in thick enough to taste. Victorian houses lined the narrow streets, their paint peeling, their shutters hanging crooked. Everything smelled like salt and decay. Perfect place to disappear. Draven had tracked Arya here within 2 days, though he'd kept his distance. Old habits from his hunting days: stay downwind, keep to the shadows, never let the prey know you're watching. Except Arya wasn't prey. And he wasn't hunting.
He was.
Observing. Protecting. Stalking. His conscience supplied unhelpfully. She lived in a small rental house 3 blocks from the harbor. Blue siding that had faded to gray, a sagging porch, bars on the windows. Not the kind of place you chose. The kind of place you settled for when you were running out of options. Draven watched from the roof of the abandoned fish cannery across the street, invisible in the pre-dawn darkness. He'd been here for hours, learning her routine. Arya worked night shifts at Greyhaven Medical Clinic, a tiny urgent care facility that probably saw more fishing accidents than actual emergencies. She'd leave the house at 10 p.m., Elias bundled in her arms, and drop him at a 24-hour daycare 2 streets over. The kind that didn't ask too many questions if you paid cash. Then she'd work until 6 a.m., pick up Elias, and hurry home before sunrise. Always before sunrise.
Did she know?
Did she understand what Elias was? What he might become in daylight? Draven's enhanced vision tracked her now as she unlocked the front door, Elias sleeping against her shoulder. The child was bigger than he'd seemed at the bus stop, probably closer to 7 months. He had Arya's dark hair, but something about his features made Draven's chest tighten. The shape of his ears. The line of his jaw. My face. He has my face. Arya disappeared inside. Lights flickered on first the living room, then what must be a bedroom. Through the thin curtains, Draven could see her silhouette as she moved around, settling Elias into what looked like a crib. Then she stood there, just stood there, her hand on the crib rail. Her shoulders shook. She was crying. Draven's fingers dug into the roof's edge, crumbling the old concrete to dust. An hour passed. Then another. Arya finally collapsed on the couch, still in her scrubs, too exhausted to make it to her own bed. This was her life now. Working nights, hiding, raising a child alone while jumping at every shadow. Because of him. Because of what he was. What they'd created together. Draven waited until her breathing deepened into sleep, then dropped from the roof in perfect silence. He crossed the street like smoke, scaling the side of her house to peer through the bedroom window. The nursery was sparse. A second-hand crib, a changing table, a mobile with little stars that didn't spin anymore. But the walls were covered in symbols. Draven's blood went cold. Protection wards. Sigils against dark magic. Binding runes to hide supernatural presence. She knew. Arya knew exactly what Elias was, and she'd turned her home into a fortress against the very world Draven came from. Inside the crib, Elias slept peacefully, one tiny fist clutching a stuffed rabbit. He looked perfectly normal. Perfectly human. Just a baby dreaming baby dreams. Then his eyes opened. Draven froze. The child wasn't looking around randomly like infants did. His gaze went straight to the window. Straight to where Draven stood in the shadows. And his eyes. They flickered. Just for a second. A brief flash of amber light, like dying embers, before fading back to human brown. Elias stared at him.
Didn't cry.
Didn't fuss.
Just watched.
He can see me. A 7-month-old child, in the dark, through a window, seeing a vampire that had centuries of practice staying invisible. The prophecy wasn't just real. It was staring at him with eyes too old for its face. A heartbeat later, Elias's face scrunched up and he began to wail. Draven dropped from the window as Arya jerked awake inside. He heard her stumbling footsteps, her soothing voice, the creak of the crib as she lifted Elias into her arms. Shuh, baby.
Shuh.
It's okay. Mama's here. Nothing can hurt you. I promise. I promise. The desperation in her voice was a knife between his ribs. From his position in the alley beside the house, Draven heard her start to hum. A lullaby. One he recognized because he'd hummed it to her once, years ago, when she couldn't sleep after a nightmare. She'd kept that. Kept a piece of him to give their son. Movement at the end of the alley made Draven's head snap around. A man stood there. Tall, thin, wearing a long coat despite the relative warmth. His scent hit Draven a moment later. Old blood, grave dirt, and something else.
Vampire. But not just any vampire.
The scent signature was familiar. One of Sarek's clan. The man's lips curved into a smile, revealing fangs. Well, he said softly. The rumors were true. Draven Valemont, hiding in a fishing town. How the mighty have fallen. Then his eyes flicked toward Arya's house. Toward the window where Elias's crying had finally quieted. And protecting Vermund, no less. Tell me, my lord, does the human whore know what you really are? Does she know you're the reason her bastard will never be safe? Draven moved. The vampire's head hit the alley wall before he could scream. Draven's hand crushed his throat, lifting him off the ground like a doll. How many? His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of 3 centuries of violence. How many of you are here? The vampire clawed at Draven's grip, feet kicking uselessly. His eyes bulged with shock, and something else. Excitement. Enough, he choked out. Enough to finish what should have been done 7 years ago. Draven slammed him into the wall again. Brick cracked. Sarek sent you. Lord Sarek knows everything. The vampire's smile was bloody. He knows about the woman,
The child.
the abomination you created. Ice flooded Draven's veins.
Impossible.
I've been careful. Careful. The vampire laughed, a wet, gurgling sound. You think you're the only one with spies? We've been watching, waiting. The prophecy cannot be allowed to. Draven twisted. The vampire's neck snapped with a sound like breaking celery. His body went limp, already beginning to decompose. In seconds, there'd be nothing left but ash and the smell of sulfur. But the damage was done. They knew. Sarek knew. Draven dropped the dissolving corpse and pulled out his phone. His fingers shook, actual tremors, something he hadn't experienced since the night he'd been turned. He pulled up the encrypted messaging app that connected him to what remained of his old network. One message waited, sent 3 hours ago. The council convenes. Sarek claims right of blood hunt. Target, the hybrid child. Vote passed unanimously. Execution order effective immediately. Blood hunt. The highest death sentence in vampire law. Once declared, every vampire in the world was obligated to kill the target on sight. No trial.
No merci. No escape.
And they'd voted unanimously. Even his few remaining allies had abandoned him. Draven stared at the message until the screen went dark, showing his reflection. He looked human enough. But behind his eyes, something ancient and violent stirred. The part of him that had once commanded armies, that had burned cities, that had earned the title of Vampire King through rivers of blood. That part of him wanted to tear Sarek apart slowly, piece by piece, until he begged for the mercy of final death. But first, he had to warn Arya. He moved to her front door, then hesitated. His hand hovered over the wood. Inside, everything was quiet. She was probably back asleep. Elias, too. They looked peaceful through the window earlier. Safe. The moment he knocked, that illusion would shatter. Arya would see him, fear him, hate him all over again. But she'd be alive to hate him. That had to be enough. Draven knocked. Silence. Then footsteps, quick, light, cautious. The door didn't open, but he heard her breathing on the other side. Go away. Arya's voice was muffled but firm. I don't know what you want, Draven, but we don't need you. We never needed you. Arya, listen to me.
No.
You listened, the door shook like she'd hit it.
You left.
You walked away without a word, without a reason, and you don't get to just show up 7 years later and... They're coming for Elias. Silence. I know you're watching the house, Arya continued, her voice cracking. I've seen you on the rooftops. In the alleys. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Did you think I was stupid? Guilt twisted in his chest. I was trying to protect. By stalking us? By lurking in the shadows like she couldn't finish.
Didn't need to.
Like a monster. There was a vampire in the alley 3 minutes ago, Draven said quietly. I killed him. But he wasn't alone. Arya, the Vampire Council has ordered a blood hunt on our son. Do you understand what that means? I understand that you're the reason they're after him in the first place. Her voice broke completely. I read the books, Draven. After you left, I found your things, your research. I know about the prophecy. I know what Elias is. Then you know he's in danger. He's been in danger since the moment you touched me. The door flew open. Arya stood there in wrinkled scrubs, her hair wild, her eyes red from crying and exhaustion. But they blazed with fury. You made him a target. You made us both targets. And then you left. You left me pregnant and alone and terrified, and I had to figure everything out by myself. The wards, the hiding, the protection spells. I learned it all from your books because you weren't there. Draven stood frozen. Every word was a stake through his heart. I know you didn't know about the pregnancy, Arya continued, her voice dropping to something cold and hollow. But you knew what you were. You knew the risk, and you took what you wanted anyway and left me to deal with the consequences. You're right, the admission tasted like ash. You're absolutely right. But that doesn't change what's happening right now. Sarek is coming. Tonight. Maybe tomorrow. And when he gets here... A scream cut through the night. Not from inside the house. From down the street. The 24-hour daycare, where Arya had been taking Elias. Arya's face went white. Oh God.
Sarah.
The night worker. She has a baby too. Flames erupted 2 blocks away, orange and violent against the fog. They both knew what it meant. The hunters had arrived, and they were sending a message. Arya was running before Draven could stop her. Wait. He grabbed her arm, but she ripped free with surprising strength. That's where I would have taken Elias. She sprinted down the street, her scrubs flapping. If I'd worked tonight, he would have been there. Draven caught up in 2 strides, matching her pace. The flames grew brighter, angrier. Screams echoed through the fog. Human screams that cut off too quickly. They rounded the corner. The daycare was an inferno. Flames licked through broken windows, consuming curtains decorated with alphabet letters and cartoon animals. The door hung off its hinges, shattered from the inside. On the sidewalk, 3 bodies lay crumpled. A woman, Sarah, probably, and 2 others Draven didn't recognize. Their throats had been torn out. Not by fangs. By claws. No. Arya stumbled toward them, but Draven yanked her back. They're gone. And we will be too if we don't move. But a shadow dropped from the daycare's roof. Then another. And another. 5 vampires, all wearing the crimson sash of Sarek's death squad. Their eyes glowed in the firelight, red, hungry, ancient. The leader, a woman with platinum hair and a smile like a knife wound, stepped forward. Draven Valemont. Her voice was silk over razors. How kind of you to deliver yourself. Lord Sarek will be pleased. Cassandra, Draven positioned himself between her and Arya. You always did enjoy killing innocents. Innocents. Cassandra's laugh was cold. This town harbors an abomination. Everyone here is complicit, her eyes flicked to Arya. Especially the whore who birthed it. Draven moved before thought. His fist caught Cassandra in the jaw, sending her flying backward through the daycare's front window. Glass exploded. Fire roared. The other 4 vampires attacked as one. Draven was faster. 3 centuries of combat made his body a weapon that moved on pure instinct. He caught the first vampire's arm, twisted, and tore it off in a spray of black blood. The second vampire lunged for his throat, but Draven ducked and drove his hand through the attacker's chest, ripping out something that had stopped beating centuries ago. 2 down. 3 to go. Run. Draven shouted at Arya. Get Elias and... A vampire broke through his defense, slamming into him like a freight train. They crashed through a parked car's windshield. Metal shrieked. The vampire's fangs snapped inches from Draven's face. The child, the vampire hissed. Where is the hybrid child? Draven headbutt him, shattering his nose. Go to hell. Already there. Through the chaos, Draven saw Arya running. Not away from the fight, but toward it. What was she doing? Then he saw what she was reaching for. A stake. Wooden, crude, pulled from the daycare's broken fence. Arya, don't. She drove it into the back of the vampire, holding Draven. The creature shrieked, arching backward. It wasn't a killing blow, wrong angle, missed the heart, but it gave Draven the opening he needed. He grabbed the vampire's head and twisted until something fundamental broke.
Ash.
Just ash. Arya stood there, stake still raised, her whole body shaking. Behind you, Draven roared.
She spun.
Another vampire was already mid-lunge, claws extended, mouth open in a soundless scream. Time slowed to syrup. Draven moved, but he was too far. The vampire was too fast. Arya tried to raise the stake, but she was too slow. The claws would reach her throat in a heartbeat. Then the vampire simply
stopped.
Froze midair like someone had pressed pause on reality. No, not froze. Burned. White light erupted from the vampire's chest, spreading like lightning through a dead tree. The creature's mouth opened in a silent scream as its body disintegrated from the inside out. In seconds, there was nothing left but falling ash and the smell of scorched air. Arya stood untouched, her eyes wide with shock. Behind her, the front door of her house hung open. And standing in the doorway, held in the arms of an elderly neighbor woman who must have been babysitting, was Elias. The child's eyes glowed pure white. Not amber like Draven's. Not red like the attacking vampires.
White.
Like sunlight concentrated into human form. His tiny hand was still extended, fingers splayed. Around them, the remaining vampires, including Cassandra, who just climbed out of the burning daycare, recoiled as if struck.
Impossible, Cassandra bretted.
The prophecy said the power wouldn't manifest until Elias's other hand lifted. Light exploded outward in a wave. Cassandra screamed and fled, disappearing into the fog at inhuman speed. The last vampire tried to follow, but the light caught it, turning it to ash before it managed 3 steps. Then, as suddenly as it started, the light vanished. Elias slumped in the neighbor's arms, unconscious. The woman, Mrs. Chun from next door, Draven's enhanced senses supplied, stood frozen in terror, holding the child like he might explode again. The street fell silent except for the crackling flames. Arya ran to Elias, snatching him from the neighbor's arms. Is he breathing? Oh God, is he? He's alive, Draven said, his voice rough. He could hear the child's heartbeat, rapid but strong. Just exhausted. Arya clutched Elias to her chest, tears streaming down her face. What did they do to him? What did they make him do? He saved you. Draven looked at the pile of ash that had been a vampire seconds ago. He saved us both. Sirens wailed in the distance. Fire trucks.
Police.
Humans who would ask questions they couldn't answer. We have to go, Draven said.
Now.
Cassandra will report back to Sarek, and he'll come with everything he has. Arya looked at her burning town, at the bodies on the sidewalk, at the neighbor who still hadn't moved. Then she looked at Draven. Where? She whispered. Somewhere they can't follow, he met her eyes. Somewhere safe. Nowhere safe, but she was already moving toward her house. Give me 2 minutes. I need supplies. She disappeared inside. Draven stood guard in the street, watching the fog, listening for footsteps that moved too fast to be human. Elias had manifested. The prophecy was accelerating. And somewhere in the darkness, Sarek was sharpening his claws. They drove through the night in a stolen Honda Civic, the most unremarkable car Draven could hotwire in under 30 seconds. Arya sat in the passenger seat, Elias strapped in a car seat she'd grabbed during her frantic 2-minute packing. The baby slept through everything, his chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm of exhaustion. His tiny face was peaceful, innocent. Like he hadn't just incinerated 2 vampires with light that shouldn't exist. The highway stretched ahead, empty and dark. Draven kept them off the main roads, navigating by memory through backroads that hadn't changed in 50 years. Heading northeast, away from the coast, toward mountains that held secrets older than America itself. "Where are we going?" Arya's voice was hoarse. She hadn't spoken in over an hour. "Old sanctuary. Abandoned for 2 centuries," Draven's hands tightened on the wheel. "It's warded against magical tracking. If anywhere's safe, it's there. And if nowhere's safe." He didn't answer.
Couldn't.
Arya turned to look at him. Really look at him, for the first time since he'd appeared back in her life. "You need to tell me everything. No more secrets. No more protection through ignorance. If I'm going to keep Elias alive, I need to know what we're facing." Draven's jaw clenched. "You already know. You read my research. I read about a prophecy. About a child who could end or save 2 races," her voice cracked. "I didn't read about my baby being a weapon. About him having to kill before he can even walk." "He didn't kill," the words came out sharper than intended. He defended. "There's a difference." "Is there?" To him, Arya looked at Elias. "What kind of life is that? What kind of childhood?" "The kind I had," Draven thought but didn't say. "Turned at 16. Trained to kill. Never knowing peace." They drove in silence for another 20 miles. The mountains loomed ahead, black silhouettes against a slightly less black sky. Dawn was still hours away, but Draven could feel it coming. The pull of daylight, the warning that said, "Find shelter or burn." "Why did you leave?" Arya's question was so quiet he almost missed it. "The real reason. Not the prophecy. Not the danger. Why did you walk away from me?" Draven stared at the road. At the white lines disappearing under the car. At anything but her face. "I was afraid," he finally said. "Of what?" "Of this. Of watching you die." The words came faster now, like poison being drained from a wound. "Everyone I've ever loved has died, Arya. Everyone. My human family, centuries ago. The few vampires I called friends. Everyone who gets close to me ends up in the ground. So you left to protect me." "Yes." "That's the most arrogant thing I've ever heard." Draven's head snapped toward her. "Excuse me? You decided alone, without asking me, that your fear was more important than my choice." Arya's eyes blazed. "I loved you, Draven. I would have faced any danger, any enemy, anything. But you didn't trust me enough to fight beside you. You just vanished. I thought. You thought you knew better. You thought you were sparing me pain." She laughed bitterly. "Do you have any idea what it was like? Waking up to an empty bed? Finding all your things gone? Thinking maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe I'd gone crazy, until I found out I was pregnant and knew it was real." Draven's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. "I spent 6 months alone and terrified," Arya continued. "Reading your books, trying to understand what was growing inside me. Wondering if it would kill me from the inside. Wondering if you'd left because you knew." "I didn't know." "I know!" Her shout woke Elias. The baby whimpered, and Arya immediately softened, reaching back to touch his hand. "Sure, baby. Mama's here. It's okay." Elias settled, his tiny fingers wrapping around hers. When Arya spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. "I know you didn't know. That's what makes it worse. You didn't even give me the chance to tell you." Draven pulled the car over. They were somewhere in the mountains now, surrounded by pine trees that blotted out the stars. He put the car in park and just sat there, gripping the wheel like it was the only solid thing left in the world. "I'm sorry," the words felt inadequate. Pathetic.
"I'm so sorry, Arya."
"You're right. About all of it. I was a coward. I ran because I was afraid, not just of losing you, but of what loving you meant. Of being vulnerable. Of being human." He finally turned to face her. "But I'm here now. And I swear on everything I am, everything I was, I will not run again. Not from you. Not from him. Whatever comes, we face it together." Arya studied his face for a long moment. Tears tracked down her cheeks, silver in the dashboard light. He has your eyes, she said softly. When he's angry or scared, they turn amber, just for a second. And sometimes when I hold him, he's so cold. Not sick cold.
Just. Not warm.
Like his body can't decide what temperature it should be. Half and half, Draven murmured, caught between two worlds. Will he ever be able to choose? I don't know. Arya reached across the center console. Her hand found his, warm flesh against cool skin, alive and dead, touching in the darkness. Then we figured out together, she said. The sanctuary was a ruin pretending to be a church. It sat at the end of a road that had been reclaimed by forest, its stone walls covered in moss and ivy. Stained glass windows, long since shattered, gaped like empty eye sockets. The roof had collapsed in places, letting moonlight spill across broken pews. But beneath the decay, power hummed. Old magic, woven into the foundation stones by vampire elders who'd known the world before Christ walked it. Protection wards that still held, even after 200 years of abandonment. This is safe. Arya clutched Elias tighter as they approached. Safer than anywhere else, Draven pushed open the massive wooden doors. They groaned, but held. The wards prevent magical tracking and create a barrier against hostile intent. Nothing can get in unless...
He stopped.
The interior of the church wasn't empty. A man stood at the altar, tall and elegant in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Arya's car. His silver hair was pulled back in a ponytail, revealing features that were almost beautiful. Almost. There was something wrong about his symmetry, like a painting done by someone who'd never seen a real human face. Lord Sarek. Unless invited, Sarek finished, his voice smooth as poisoned honey. Do finish your sentences, Draven. It's rude to leave people hanging. Draven shoved Arya behind him. How? The wards. Sarek smiled. They're keyed to vampire elders. Which, last I checked, still includes me. You really thought I'd forgotten about this place? I helped build it. Draven's mind raced. Stupid. He'd been so focused on getting them somewhere safe, he'd forgotten that Sarek was old enough to remember when this sanctuary was new. What do you want? Draven asked, though he already knew. Sarek's eyes, pale blue, almost colorless, flicked to Arya, to the bundle in her arms. You know what I want. The abomination. The prophecy child. The thing that threatens everything we've built for millennia. He's a baby. He's a weapon. Sarek descended from the altar, his footsteps echoing. You saw what he did in Greyhaven. Cassandra barely escaped with her existence. 5 of my best hunters. Gone in seconds. And that's just the beginning. He stopped 10 feet away, hands clasped behind his back like a professor giving a lecture. The prophecy says he'll grow stronger. That by his 20th year, he'll have power enough to end the eternal night. Do you know what that means, old friend? It means he can kill every vampire on Earth with a thought. Eradicate our entire species. Or save us. Draven shot back. The prophecy goes both ways. End the night, or herald a new dawn. He could bring balance. Balance. Sarek's laugh was sharp. You've gone soft, Draven. Centuries of ruling, and one pretty human makes you forget what you are. We are predators. Apex predators. We don't need balance with our food. Behind Draven, Arya's breathing quickened. He could smell her fear, sharp and acrid. Leave, Draven said quietly. Walk away, Sarek. This doesn't have to end in blood. It always ends in blood. That's what we are. Sarek's eyes glowed crimson. You were the one who taught me that. Remember?
Vienna, 1679.
You slaughtered an entire monastery because one priest discovered what you were. 43 men, dead before dawn. I was different then.
No.
You were honest then. Sarek's face twisted with disgust. Now you're just a domesticated monster playing house. It's pathetic. He moved. Not toward Elias. Toward Draven. The impact sent them both crashing through a pew. Wood exploded. Draven's head cracked against stone, and for a moment his vision widened out. Sarek was on top of him, hands around his throat. I'll make this quick. For old time's sake. Then the woman. Then. Draven's knee drove into Sarek's stomach, launching him backward. They both sprang to their feet, circling like wolves. Run. Draven shouted at Arya. There's a crypt below the altar, iron door, get inside, and… Sarek blurred forward. His claws raked across Draven's chest, shredding fabric and flesh. Black blood sprayed. Draven retaliated with a punch that shattered Sarek's jaw. The bone reformed instantly, healing as fast as it broke. They were too evenly matched. Both ancient. Both powerful. This could last hours. Hours Arya and Elias didn't have. Through the fighting, Draven saw her running toward the altar, searching for the crypt entrance. Good. If she could get below, the iron would dampen Elias's supernatural signature. Maybe. Sarek's hand punched through Draven's stomach. Pain exploded. Not the dull ache of normal injury, but white-hot agony. Sarek had coated his claws in silver. Sorry, old friend, Sarek twisted his hand. But you left me no choice. Draven collapsed, silver poisoning spreading through his system like liquid fire. His vision blurred. His limbs wouldn't respond. Sarek withdrew his hand and turned toward Arya. She'd found the crypt entrance, but couldn't get it open. The iron door was sealed shut, rusted from centuries of disuse. Hello, little mother, Sarek purred, stalking toward her. Don't worry. I'll make it painless.
Well.
Relatively. Stay back. Arya held Elias tighter. The baby was awake now, watching Sarek with those two old eyes. Give me the child, and I'll let you live. You can have more babies. Human babies. Normal babies that won't.
Light.
Not the white light from before. This was different. Golden, warm, and somehow alive. Elias's tiny hand extended.
His fingers spread.
The light built slowly this time, gathering in his palm like a miniature sun. It grew brighter, hotter, until the entire sanctuary blazed with noonday brilliance. Sarek screamed. His skin began to smoke, then char, then peel away in strips. No, impossible. He's too young. The power shouldn't. The light intensified. Sarek's scream cut off as his body ignited from the inside. He tried to run, to escape, but the light followed him.
Consumed him.
Turned him into a pillar of fire that collapsed into ash, then nothing. Lord Sarek, elder vampire, architect of the blood hunt, was gone. The light faded. Elias slumped in Arya's arms, unconscious again. And through the broken roof, the first rays of true dawn began to creep across the sanctuary floor. Draven, still paralyzed by silver poisoning, could only watch as sunlight, his oldest enemy, reached toward him like grasping fingers. The sunlight touched his hand first. Draven's skin didn't just burn, it dissolved. Flesh turned to smoke, revealing bone that blackened and crumbled like ancient paper. The pain was beyond description, beyond thought. 300 years of cheating death, ending in agonizing seconds. No. Arya's scream cut through his fading consciousness. No, Draven move. He couldn't. The silver had paralyzed him completely. He could only lie there, watching the dawn creep across the stone floor toward the rest of his body. This was it, then. The end he'd always known was coming. Death by sunrise. Poetic, really. At least Elias was safe. Sarek was gone. The immediate threat had ended. That had to be enough. Arya ran to him, still clutching the unconscious Elias. She dropped to her knees beside him, her hand hovering over his disintegrating flesh, but too afraid to touch. What do I do? Tell me what to do.
Get.
Below, each word cost him. Crypt. Iron will hide. His signature. I'm not leaving you. Have to. The sunlight reached a shoulder. More smoke. More agony.
Can't.
Stop it. Tears streamed down Arya's face. After everything? After you promised not to run? You're just going to die.
Not.
Running. A bitter smile cracked his lips. Just out of time. She looked at Elias, then at the spreading sunlight, then back at Draven. Something shifted in her expression. Decision. Determination. The same look she'd had when she'd driven a stake into a vampire to save him. Arya stood and carried Elias to a shadowed corner where the collapsed roof created a pocket of darkness. She laid him gently on her jacket, then ran back to Draven. "What are you?" He couldn't finish. The sunlight was at his chest now. His heart, what remained of it, struggled to beat. Arya grabbed his arms and pulled, dragged him across the floor toward the shadow. She was strong for a human, but he was deadweight and disintegrating. For every foot she gained, the sun gained too.
Arya.
Stop, his voice was barely a whisper.
You'll
hurt yourself. Shut up, she pulled harder, her face red with effort. Just shut up and let me save you for once. The shadow was still 10 feet away. The sun had consumed half his torso. He could see his own ribs through the smoke. He was going to die. And he was going to make her watch. "I'm sorry," he breathed.
For
everything. Tell Elias. Tell him. Tell him yourself. Arya's voice broke on a sob, but she didn't stop pulling. 5 feet from the shadow. His legs were gone now, just smoke trailing behind them. 3 feet. His vision was fading, turning gray at the edges. 1 foot. Arya gave a final, desperate heave and pulled him into the darkness. The burning stopped. The sunlight's edge kissed the shadow's boundary, but couldn't cross it. Some trick of the collapsed architecture created a barrier the dawn couldn't penetrate. Draven lay there, gasping. Or trying to. His lungs were half dissolved. Arya collapsed beside him, sobbing. Her hands trembled over what was left of his body, wanting to touch, to comfort, but afraid of causing more pain.
You
saved me. Draven's voice was barely audible. Don't talk. Just rest. You'll heal, right? Vampires heal. He wanted to say yes, wanted to lie, but what was left of him was too damaged. The sunlight had taken too much. Even with shadow and time, some wounds were beyond healing. Arya, he lifted his remaining hand, barely more than bone wrapped in charred flesh. She took it gently, her warm fingers cradling his cold ones. Thank you. For him. For giving me.
Essel.
Stop. Stop talking like you're dying. I am blood, black and thick, leaked from his mouth. But it's
okay.
I got to see him.
See you.
One last time. Movement in the corner. Elias was waking up, his small face scrunching with confusion, with discomfort. Then the baby began to cry. Not his normal cry. This was different. Distressed. Desperate. His tiny hand reached toward Draven, fingers grasping at empty air, reaching for his father. And something impossible happened. Golden light, softer than before, gentler, emanated from Elias's palm. It drifted through the air like fireflies, like gentle snow, settling on Draven's destroyed body. Where the light touched, flesh began to regrow. Not quickly, not dramatically, but steadily, impossibly, the burned tissue knitted itself back together. Bone reformed. Muscle regenerated.
Arya gasped.
What is he? Healing me. Draven's voice grew stronger.
He's
healing me. The light continued for several minutes. Elias's crying softened to whimpers, then stopped entirely. The golden glow faded. When it was gone, Draven lay whole, scarred and weak, but alive. Completely, impossibly alive. He sat up slowly, staring at his regenerated hands, at his chest where the silver poisoning had been.
Gone.
All of it gone. Elias watched him with those ancient eyes, then smiled, a real baby smile, pure and innocent. The prophecy, Arya whispered. And the night, or herald a new dawn. Draven, what if it doesn't mean destroy or save? What if it means change? Draven looked at his son. At the child who'd killed vampires with light, but healed his father with the same power. Destruction and salvation, wrapped in a 7-month-old package. A new dawn, he murmured. Not an ending. A beginning. He reached for Elias. The baby grabbed his finger and held on tight, that impossible strength in such a tiny grip. What do we do now? Arya asked. Draven looked at her. This woman who'd survived everything, who'd raised their impossible child alone, who'd saved him when he'd given up. We live, he said simply. We raise him. We teach him to control his power. And when he's old enough, we let him choose what kind of world he wants to create. And the vampires? The ones who'll keep hunting him. Let them come. Draven's smile was sharp. We'll be ready. Outside, the sun continued its climb. Inside the sanctuary's shadow, a family sat together. Vampire king, mortal woman, and the child who had bridged 2 worlds. The prophecy had awakened. But it wouldn't end in blood. It would begin in love. 20 years later, the art gallery was crowded with admirers, all staring at the massive mural that dominated the entire back wall. It showed a vampire standing in sunlight, not burning, but glowing. One hand reaching toward the dawn, the other held by a woman and a child. Remarkable, someone whispered. The way he captured the light. It's like it's alive. In the corner, Arya stood with silver threading through her dark hair. She was older now, lines around her eyes, but still beautiful, still strong. Beside her, Elias, 20 years old, tall and confident, smiled at his own work. His eyes flickered between amber and brown, never quite settling on either. Do you think he would have liked it? Elias asked softly. Arya touched the pendant around her neck, a small vial containing ashes.
He loved you.
That's all that ever mattered to him. I know. Elias stared at the mural, at the father he'd saved but couldn't keep. I just wish. I know, baby. Me too. Outside, rain began to fall, but where it touched the gallery's skylights, it seemed to glow gold. Like light, like hope, like dawn.
The end.